Let's take a look at how the markets performed today, and I've got Bright Khumalo from Vestact to talk through what happened through those market movements. But before we do that, let's take a look at what the JSE closed at today, better than it had performed over the last 2 days. And of course, you'll see the same with the local unit. Let's take a closer look. Let's break those numbers down with Bright Khumalo from Vestact. Bright, let's start with that overall JSE performance today. Does the decision made by the Federal Reserve have anything to do with the movements that we saw, or are there other more interesting catalysts?
Look, I think you're referring to the U.S. Central Bank, which left rates unchanged between 0 and 0.25%, which is still very low considering the fact that, they've been printing money and leaving these interest rates, at all-time lows. And we've seen, obviously, in places like Europe, where those numbers have actually gone negative, in places like Switzerland, Germany, and the likes. Obviously, I think it was more, the tone of Jerome Powell when he was issuing this downbeat statement on the actual, recovery of the United States economy. So that basically showed investors that, things aren't as rosy as the markets are showing it to be. And as a result, we saw the markets yesterday, they were down about 2% on average. But I see today, it seems like, yesterday never happened. And we have, the Dow up 1.4%, which helped us, South Africans here, because we closed up, in the green on the JSE as a result. We closed 2/3 up. In terms of that, leading the charge was, those mining or resources companies.
Right, let's move on to some company news, and which will obviously include some of the mining companies. But we start with Musica, seeing that SENS announcement this morning, and I'm thinking, finally, why didn't you do this earlier? The closure of Musica, no longer able to buy CDs in store. Your thoughts on that move made by Clicks Group?
It was inevitable. It was a matter of time. We were just counting, the hours, the days, the seconds, the minutes, you name it. I mean, this was only 59 Musica stores. Unfortunately, the people that used to man these stores are going to lose their jobs. Yeah, it is what it is. And mostly, this is due obviously to the rise of, Apple Music and Spotify, which you own Spotify for our clients at Vestact. Just a side note there. But obviously, these things, accelerate what was going to happen to Musica anyways. South African companies need to adapt to the changes that we're seeing in technology, and Musica is a good example of what happens if you actually don't adapt.
Right, something that did adapt to the changing prices of commodities with Anglo American. They saw a nice bounce back in production. But I thought this was interesting, Bright. They're going to be cutting out the output for their diamond targets. And globally, we are seeing that diamond sales are increasing quite impressively.
Look, I'm no expert in mining, but I think the reason why, there's a high demand for diamonds right now, we've seen people basically not being able to travel as they're locked down in their respective countries, as these countries, try to appease or append, the spread of the COVID-19 virus. So obviously, it meant if you had money to spend, and you wanted to travel, you'd use that money to buy something else, and people are spending more time with their loved ones, and as a result, they're spending more and more on them. So jewelry picks up, luxury goods, we saw LVMH coming out with very strong numbers in China, also picking up there, leading by things like, fashion and leather goods. So, those handbags, those Christian Dior handbags doing exceptionally well, as well as Louis Vuitton as well. So this all, boils down to, not being able to spend your money the way you want to spend it, so you're forced on spending it elsewhere. That's why I think the diamonds were, seeing, a great demand there. But looking at this actual trading update itself, it's very interesting. I mean, Anglo was operating around 60% of production capacity. There's a lot of problems involved there, especially on the local front. So it's very impressive that they were able to, bring out these kind of numbers that we're seeing from them.
Meanwhile, Kumba Iron ore seeing a decrease in its production. I don't know if it's got to do with iron ore prices, Bright?
Well, yeah, it has to do, with iron ore prices there. And also the fact that they suspended some of the, operations in Grosvenor metallurgical coal mines, and all of these things all are happening at the same time. Again, operating in South Africa can be actually very tricky. We know we've got the Eskom problem. We know we've got, the current pandemic where our lockdown is actually much harsher than the rest of the world. And as a result, some of these businesses are actually struggling, in a big way because they can't stay competitive to, other companies of a similar nature that don't operate in South Africa. And Kumba Iron is a perfect example in this case.
Right, a final one for you, Bright, taking it international. GameStop, you made me aware of this particular company and the fact that it hit record levels in the US, and it made headlines both locally and internationally. But as someone who's not part of that industry or interested in the least bit, I'm very interested to know, what is the hype?
So basically there's a subreddit called our Wall Street Bets. So it's a bunch of retail investors who, take big bets on certain stocks, and GameStop happened to be one of them, ages ago, as far as last year during the pandemic. The reason why GameStop, they picked that one, it was a turnaround story. The COVID-19 pandemic happened, and, physical stores were shut down. People couldn't go to those physical stores to buy, appliances and these games that they sell, the video games that they sell, and the consoles like, the PS4s and the Xboxes. And as a result, it didn't look so good for them. But these guys thought it would be, funny or great to actually buy into this company just to see what happens. And a lot of these hedge fund companies were actually short, meaning, they were betting against companies like GameStop and, other companies, for example, in the entertainment space or, in the movie business, if you, go out there and watch movies. So all of these businesses, these guys invested in these businesses, and they're doing exceptionally well because they've actually been able to make it through the pandemic. And all of these big hedge fund managers are actually losing a ton of money for their clients in this GameStop bet. So it's more like, David and Goliath, and, David is winning big time, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely winning, and at the same time, he's keeping people entertained while they sit in their homes. Bright, thank you so much for your time this evening. That's Bright Khumalo, who is from Vestact Asset Management. In the next